Today we are here with my good friend, Miss Wanda Felty. Wanda is my guinea pig. I'm going to try to do some of these interviews. And who better to start with than Wanda Felty? So Wanda, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Hey, today I want to start by saying how we met, or how I remember we met. So in 2013, I was a student at the time in the Partners in Policymaking program. And they were bringing in all these resources from all over the state. And I remember they brought in Wanda Felty from the Center for Learning and Leadership. I had no idea what that meant at all. I had never met you before in my life, never seen you. I was impressed with your presentation, but I remember you asking where everybody was from. And we kind of went around the room a little bit to get an idea of who we were and where we were from. I remember you saying, really? Along the lines of, really? I'm from Spiro. And I said, no way. So we kind of hit it off from there. And ever since, I mean, you're kind of my go-to when it's time to ask questions about advocacy. And I wish you could see her work. I've got another story I'm going to tell here in a little bit, but you can see her work as an advocate, especially at the Capitol. She does amazing work. But I want to start by asking you, tell your story a little bit. Tell why you're an advocate, how you got started. Go.
Okay. So, first of all, I'm a mom. My most proudest title, lowest paying job financially, but most emotionally rewarding job. That's who I am. That's who I will always be. I've got 3 girls. My oldest daughter, I acquired her through my first marriage and then later adopted her. My middle daughter, Kayla, was born in '88, and then my youngest daughter is 5 years younger than Kayla. We moved to Oklahoma from Texas when Kayla was a year old. We moved to Spiro, Oklahoma, and Kayla had already been diagnosed with a disability from birth, and I started navigating the service system, disability system, education system. It wasn't probably almost a year after I moved to Spiro, so Kayla was 2 years old. We went across the border to Fort Smith, Arkansas for her services and supports. And then we would travel to Tulsa and then travel to Muskogee for therapies once a week. And that was my life. Then life happened, life moved on. I ended up getting a divorce. I left Spiro, went to a small town out of Stillwater called Perkins. I was a single mom. I was navigating being a single mom, working full time, trying to support my girls. And the system seemed to become a bigger barrier. The needs of Kayla seemed to be foreign to the school system. In fact, we lived in Perkins for 3 months before they even had a school placement for her. So that was my first experience in filing for due process. I had a friend that I had met through Partners in Policymaking, and she helped me navigate that. We didn't have to go to the fair hearing, but it really taught me I have to know the rules. If I don't know the rules, how can I even know if whatever I'm requesting is doing what it's supposed to be doing, or is it if it's even meeting the needs that Kayla has? I lived over there for about 3.5 years. I applied for a job at Children's Hospital in the neonatal intensive care. I was a family advocate. Moved to Norman, been here 1915, I don't know, a bunch of years. And I worked there for 7 years, and it was working in that system that I realized if families, the users of the help, doesn't speak to the creators of the help, both intentions are good, but if those two don't come together, the system may not meet the needs of those who need it. And so I also learned about appeals and how to navigate policy when you're trying to justify a request. And I used to ask, who wrote these policies if that policy keeps saying no to the people who need it? And so that's where I got interested in policy. I went to several appeals. It was through that process I learned policy, and I found out policy is not the enemy. Even the system who is providing the help is not the enemy. It's the information didn't get from one place to the other. So my motive is for every user of every support system service, if they're not speaking to the creator of that system, then we've got to disconnect on what's out there. So that's my passion is policy. That's how come. Kayla's my best educator. She's now 31 and she teaches me every day, which I have to check on her.
So communication breakdown basically is where we have our biggest problem.
I don't even know if I would call it breakdown. I think communication wasn't generated from the beginning. I think every service support program, new system, I think they all start from somebody seeing a need. And so we have the payer of the new help with good intentions, but they didn't go get the people who it will help to help them create it. So I don't think it's a breakdown. Breakdown sounds like somebody broke something that was already fixed. I'm saying it's from the very beginning. We've got to include the users of everything. And when I say users, I'm not just talking about me, mom. I'm talking about all the Kaylas of the world. So if I've got a family member who has really good intentions, and I've got a self-advocate who's 15 years old, I think I better include them in the conversation too, because what my mama wanted for me for my whole life may not have met my intentions for my whole life. So Kayla was in school from the time in the Spiro school system from the time she was about 3.5, 4 years old. She actually went into a school setting in Spiro, utilizing special education services through the co-op, the LaFleur County Co-op. And what I learned probably within a year or so, probably that first year, it wasn't just communication, it was really relationship. Every day I was leaving my 3.5, 4-year-old daughter with a teacher who had just graduated from college, with a para who had a really strong heart. We had several levels of administration. And if I felt like I was fighting the system, and then I was handing over my daughter to people I fought with, something wasn't right. So what I really had to do is I had to change. And it wasn't just communication, it was relationship. I had to work on a relationship with the people I was trusting Kayla with. When you start building a relationship, guess what happens almost automatically? Your communication improves. It expands. You really have a relationship. You really do respect their perspective, and they take time to hear and learn your perspective, and then you work together. So yeah. I wanted to point that out.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I'm going to tell a story real quick. I want to tell how impressive it is to watch Wanda in action. I'll be honest, I'm not the best when it comes to advocacy at the Capitol. And especially when I first started, it was intimidated. I was a little shy. I don't believe that, but I am shy sometimes. Until I get to know you, and then it's all over. But we were at the Capitol one year, and we were working on, I believe we were working on the autism reform, but I can't remember. It could have been something else. I had my representative kind of standing over in a corner, And Wanda had hers or somebody over in another section. So we were about 20 to 30 feet apart. I don't know if you remember this or not, but I'm sitting here talking to him, and we're just kind of talking about, LaFleur County things, what's going on with the person down the road or whatever. And out of the corner of my eye, I see Wanda. She's still giving her representative what for. I mean, she's just really telling him all about what needs to be told, right? But she's got her hand kind of to the side, and she's like doing this, like, go tell him what he needs to know. She's coaching me while she's doing her thing. And I'm like, okay. So I'm kind of, and I don't know how she did it, but it's multitasking at its best. It was impressive. She finishes up, and I hear her say, well, okay, I've got to, I'll talk to you later. She walks straight over to me, and I introduce her to the representative I was talking to, and she just starts from out of nowhere. Did you know, and she's telling this list of things, did you know that we can do this and this and this, and the waiting list is this and this and this, and this guy had no idea what had hit him. I mean, he was just kind of like, and he's kind of starting to back away. I watch Wanda, and she's backing him into a corner instead of backing him out of but she's very impressive. She knows what to say. She has everything. In fact, if I go to the Capitol to do advocacy work, one of the first things I do is call Wanda and say, what points do I need to talk about? And she'll have it all lined out for me. Okay, this is what's important right now. This is what they need to know. And I'll write these notes down, and I still, So my question, I guess, is off of that. I'm so impressed to watch you. Where did you learn that?
So first of all, I've got to tell you my story. I went through Partners in Policymaking. I finished up in 2001. And one of the things that we were supposed to do is talk to legislators. Don't tell anybody over at the DD Council, I did not talk to a legislator my year when I went through Partners. I was too nervous. When we did those mock whatever, legislative, whatever, I was so nervous, I couldn't talk. It was bad. I was just a mom, and that's not what I signed up for. I signed up to take care of Kayla. Through Partners, I learned I can take care of Kayla all I want, but when I'm not here to take care of Kayla, the system's gonna do whatever it's created to do. And it was after I left Partners that I decided I've got to quit advocating for Kayla, and I've got to advocate for all. Because if the system is fixed, then it's fixed for Kayla and all the other Kaylas out there, whether I'm here or not. It changed my perspective. But I still had not walked into that Capitol until it was probably, so I started working at Children's Hospital in 2004. It was probably 2005, 2006. They were working on self-directed services where you didn't have to use a provider agency to get direct care through the Developmental Disability Services waiver. The agencies were taking almost half of the overhead of the hourly rate and using it for administrative overhead. I've learned since then, they've got a lot of rules and a lot of requirement through the policy that they have to cover. So that's where that was. But I was just a mom. It's like, what? You're only paying my workers $6.50 an hour? You got to be kidding me. That was before minimum wage came up. And so they were doing this, and I thought, I am for this. I'm for it. And then so my colleague, who became my colleague when I started working at the Center for Learning and Leadership, she said, you need to come to the Capitol and advocate with us. I said, sure, I'll go with you. Meaning I was going to fan her flame and let her go, and I was going to stand behind her going, yay, yay, yay. And she said, have you went and talked to them? I was like, no. She said, you got to go tell your story. I was like, oh my God. gosh, I don't know how to tell my story. And then I went back to Partners in Policymaking. So if you haven't done Partners in Policymaking, you need to sign up now, because I went back to that knowledge of what's the 2-minute speech, what's your elevator speech, tell your story, what's your lived experience. And my lived experience was, I cannot find people to work in my home for $6.50 an hour and provide all the care that Kayla needs and take care of her medical stuff. So I went in there shaken, every part of my body was shaken, and I told my story. I introduced myself, I told about Kayla, and I told about how one summer my husband and I used all of our paid leave because we could not get care for Kayla over the summer in a program she already qualified for. From that time, I thought, it's not about my knowledge. It's about my lived experience and helping the decision makers take that lived experience and help the programs that are intended to help. So everything that I did that day was really about helping you tell your story to the person that makes decisions on your behalf.
Yeah, that's good advice. 2-minute punch was one of the things that they taught you. And so I'll quickly want to hit on that because you brought that up, and I think it's important to. What Wanda just said was it's important for families to tell their story. And only you can tell your story. I mean, that makes so much sense. But if you have about 2 minutes, give or take, but about 2 minutes to tell everything you need to say that person needs to know. Let's say a representative, a senator, whoever, but that person needs to know in 2 minutes. And she just kind of gave hers earlier. She went a little over 2 minutes because we have time, but she can break that down into 2 minutes or less. Mine is always, I'm a dad. I have 2 boys, Connor and Cruz. Connor was born, he's 15 years old, and at the age of 3, he was diagnosed with autism, and at that time I didn't know anything about autism, so I started doing research. And I'm not going to give my whole speech, but I've got it down, and I know how to go in and tell somebody. And I've started taking Connor with me to the Capitol, and that's been a big difference because if they can relate, if they can, I remember. They may not remember me. I'm just crazy dad that comes in and tells them that they need to do this, and that. But there's at least one representative right now, Wendy Kiger, who can tell me about Connor because Connor drew home a picture of a train, and he remembers that on his desk. Right? We were talking about something else, and Connor interrupted it. And of course, I'm like, Connor, don't interrupt. We're trying to talk, but Wendy's like, it's okay. He says, can I draw a train for you? I'm like, yeah. And so he's on his desk, like laying across his desk with his pencil and his paper, and he's drawing a train. And Lundy will remember that more than he'll remember anything that I said. So, those are the little things that we forget about. But, enough about me. Tell me, who are some of your mentors? Who are some of your mentors? I know we have some of the same.
So I didn't know what a mentor was, honestly. Till I went through Partners, and as life has gone on, I've got an arsenal of mentors. And first of all, I will tell you, a mentor is a person you look up to and that you trust, not that will always hug you, but they'll kick your butt when it needs to be kicked also. If they can't do both, they're not a mentor, they're a friend. Those are 2 different things. So Diana McCalmont was my first one. I knew when I grew up, I wanted to be like Diane McCalmont. She used her lived experience and her son's lived experience to affect people, and it affected me. Jan Moss is another mentor. She was my faculty mentor in the LEND program. But Jan Moss was the first one that taught me advocacy is not always serious. And if you're only serious, that is a sad, sad day. You got to find the funny and you got to find the serious, and you got to find the balance. So Jan Moss. Um, Sandy Ingram. Sandy Ingram, my gosh. I met her when I was in Partners in Policymaking. She's an attorney out of McLeod. If I wanted to know if I was right, if my angle was right, I would call her and she'd say, absolutely not. And I was like, whoa, I thought you were supposed to like me. And she said, well, here's how come. So what do you want inside that context? And I was like, wow. But had I not trusted her, I would have taken my story to the system and they would have chewed me up and spit me out. She gave me the rules and the whys and the why nots. And she nurtured me through the process. And whenever I went up there and made the argument for or against, it had all the information it needed. I have some national mentors. Shelley Reynolds out of UMKC, University of Missouri, Kansas City. When I grow up, I want to be a Shelley Reynolds. By the way, she's younger than me. But she takes this lived experience and puts it into pictures and words, and she says, now what? I want the now what. I'm not where I want to be, but every day I want to get there. And I'm going to tell you, every day I mess up. But it's my choice to say, show me where I messed up, show me what I got right, and lead me where I need to go. Whenever I do that, when I'm honest with myself, then every day is a learning day. And that's how I live. So I've got other mentors. That's the ones that came to my mind right now.
Tell me about the waiting list. I know nothing about the waiting list. Okay, I'm just a parent who is new to advocacy world. Tell me what the waiting list is, and tell me what I need to know as a parent about the waiting list. You are the waiting list guru.
I've been called worse, so thank you. So in Oklahoma, if you have a developmental disability, but more specifically, if you have an intellectual disability, IQ of 70 or below, that's our system right now, how we work in Oklahoma, there is a long-term support service available for anybody over the age of 3 who has an IQ of 70 or below, who they look at the individual's income, not the family's income, and it really is a lifelong support, because a person with an intellectual disability doesn't get cured of the intellectual disability. The level of support is different depending on every individual. So that service is called Developmental Disability Services Waiver. We have 3 in our state: in-home supports for adults, in-home supports for children, and the community waiver. All of those are DDS waivers. When you make an application for this waiver that you're eligible for, if you have an IQ of 70 or below and 3 years old, you make this application. They're allowed, according to the federal government, they're allowed to have a waiting list or a request list. And the only rule that was put on them is it has to be moved at a reasonable rate. So when I moved to Oklahoma City in 2004, I went to my first waiting list meeting. Another parent ran it. And Kayla had survived the waiting list. She was off the waiting list. She was receiving services. But I remember living in Spiro and her being on the waiting list, thinking nobody knew about it and nobody cared about it. So I go to this waiting list meeting thinking, I wish I would have known about this when I lived in Spiro. I would have drove all the way here. And at that point, the waiting list was so long, almost 3.5 years. 2,000 people on the waiting list. It was terrible, or so we thought. So that mom, her name was Julianne Sims, she was running this volunteer waiting list meeting. A year or so later, her daughter passed away and she asked if I wanted to take it over, and I did. And I can remember at that time, the director of DHS, his name was Howard Hendrick. He was, we had a waiting list meeting. The waiting list was moving. It was under 2 years wait. And he's like, I don't even think we need these meetings anymore. And I was like, There's still a waiting list. We still need this meeting. And what was really weird, from that moment on, that waiting list climbed and climbed and climbed and climbed. So currently, we are at 13 years, just shy of 13 years. And there's over 5,000 people on the waiting list. That means, and this waiting list goes in chronological order. So remember I told you, fill out that application, put it in. So the day you learn about the waiting list or this DDS waivers, you fill out an application and it's put in line according to when you turn in the application. So we may have a baby who's born with a diagnosis and somebody says, hey, there's a 13-year waiting list. You need to fill out this application. I don't know if your kid will need it or not, but it's 13 years. And there are some people out there that don't even know anything about developmental disability services, and their child's fixing to graduate from high school, and they go, so what's next? And I said, oh, there's the next would be DDS waivers. And they go, oh, okay, let me get it. And they said, oh, it's a 13-year list. So I may have a newborn get on the list. At the same time, I have an 18-year-old get on the list. And then we may not have somebody get on the list till they're 40. The last time I looked, there's a 70-something-year-old person on the DDS waiting list. So my question to Oklahoma is, who's waiting for what if the man or the woman is 70-something years old? So that waiting list is its own self, a reflection on our state, and we've got to fix it.
As a parent, it's difficult. So tell me, what is the hardest part for you as a parent?
The hardest part is when your advocacy touches your emotions. I can work on advocacy at a level of concrete, everything's lined up and I know what to say. But when I have to open up that personal side and expose inside, and I get emotional, when I have to talk about my fears of the future, when I have to talk about some of the past experience that really affected me, opens up those old wounds, and I end up, I get teary, choked up, and I try to think, oh my gosh, I'm a professional. I'm not supposed to be crying in the senator's office. But I have, and I will, because this is not just a job. This is our lives. So that is hard because most of the people we're advocating to work with different professionals who bring their paid job that they're very passionate about. And we carry ourselves like that. But then when it gets that emotional side and we choke up, we start doubting our skills, or I start doubting my skills as a professional. And then I have to be honest with myself. This is real. This is every day. I don't clock out at the end of the day. I just go to bed and wake up and do it again. And guess what? Sometimes I wake up at 2 or 3 to keep doing it because it's our life. So don't be so hard on yourself. And I say that to Wanda, but I also say that to every other mom and dad out there, sibling, aunt, uncle, grandma. Don't be so hard on yourself.
There are people in my life that I meet, and within 5 minutes, I learn more than I do years and years of education, for whatever that's worth. Education is kind of different altogether, but I won't go into that. Wanda, you're one of those. I can spend 5 minutes with you, and I always walk away thinking, "Oh crap! Why didn't I think of that first?" Okay, and here's something that Wanda. Every time I walk away, Wanda has a project or a job for me. Okay, here's what I want you to do. This is how she starts. You know, she talked about Jan, or not Jan, but a mentor that tells you what you need to hear, or not necessarily what you want to hear. Wanda is that person for me. and I'll ask her a question, and she'll say, in the Wanda way, okay, here's what I want you to do. And when that starts, I'm like, crap, I've got a project now. I know I've got to go do my research. But I walk away a better person because of it. So, Wanda, I owe you tremendously, and I thank you for your time. I know you are an extremely busy woman, um, but you are extremely knowledgeable. I think it's important for people to hear the things that you have to say. So, thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Um, if I can just close with this, I get dinked for saying this, but I'm gonna say it because I want everybody to know it's not a special person. I am just a mom. I am just a mom. But I quit fighting for or advocating for just Kayla. It is about us all. And I also want people to know there are days I have bad days. And I have said this for years. I am allowed to have a pity party. I mean, I can have the best of pity parties. I mean, I pull out the hats and the blowers. I've got balloons and streamers. Man, it's a big one. But in order to make sure that I don't live there, when I go to bed that night, I have to take all those pity party supplies and stick them in a drawer and know that tomorrow's a new day, and don't open that drawer the next morning. I'm not Superwoman. I'm not anything but just Wanda. And every person out there can be this voice for their life, for their family, for their system, for their services, regardless. Mental health, education. It could be people, construction people who wants to advocate over that system. We're all equal, but we all have a story to tell. And it's what you do with that story that makes the difference.
Well, thank you.
You bet.